High above the endless skies, the immortal mist around Mount Taihua had lingered for countless years without ever dispersing. Yet on that day, the veil of clouds was torn apart by roaring purple-gold divine lightning. Thunder rolled across the horizon. Lightning dyed the sea of clouds a deep, magnificent violet, drawing tens of thousands of disciples from every peak of Mount Taihua to stop and look up. Shen Qingyi stood alone at the edge of a cliff on the quiet bamboo peak. She watched the direction where the thunderbolts fell, and she knew that place was the Valley of 10,000 Tribulations, where her master, Chu Kanglan, had entered seclusion to break through. Chu Kanglan was Mount Taihua's supreme master of punishment, a great cultivator who had remained at the peak of the tribulation realm for a full 100 years. Whether he succeeded this time would decide Mount Taihua's standing in the cultivation world for generations to come. The wind swept bamboo leaves around Shen Qingyi's feet. Her plain dress had been washed until the fabric had begun to fade, and it snapped softly in the wind. Her beautiful face showed little emotion. Only her clear autumn water eyes reflected the thunderlight that filled the sky. Just then, a golden sword light tore through the air and landed heavily beside her. A young woman appeared from the light. It was her junior sister, Gu Qingyao. Gu Qingyao wore a radiant feathered robe woven with flowing spiritual light. It was a defensive treasure Chu Kanglan had personally made for her from ice silkworm thread gathered in the far north. Jade pendants hung at her waist, chiming clearly with every movement. Gu Qingyao lifted her chin slightly and glanced sideways at Shen Qingyi. There was no hiding the pride in her voice. "Senior sister, Master didn't only survive the ninefold heavenly tribulation this time. At the very center of the thunder refinement, he found 2 spirit beast eggs born from the fortune of heaven and earth." Shen Qingyi said nothing. She merely looked at Gu Qingyao in silence, a faint thread of self-mockery passing through her heart. Both of them cultivated under Chu Kanglan. Shen Qingyi had entered first. She was the eldest disciple, gifted, diligent, and steady. But from some unknown point, Chu Kanglan's gaze had turned away from her and settled entirely on Gu Qingyao. Gu Qingyao was sweet-tongued. She knew how to act weak, how to coax, how to cling. Shen Qingyi, by contrast, was quiet and cold by nature. She neither competed nor begged. Over time, the best resources of the sect, the gentlest smiles of their master, and every trace of warmth that should have belonged to both disciples had become Gu Qingyao's alone. At last, the thunderclouds in the distance began to fade. A vast and boundless pressure swept out from the direction of the main peak. It was the aura of an immortal venerable, powerful enough to make the mountains tremble. Chu Kanglan had succeeded. Gu Qingyao gave a delighted cry, immediately mounted her flying sword, and rushed toward the main peak without the slightest intention of waiting for Shen Qingyi. Shen Qingyi slowly withdrew her gaze and summoned her own ordinary blue steel sword, following at an unhurried pace. By the time she arrived at Lingxiao Hall on Mount Taihua's main peak, the hall was already packed with elders and elite disciples from every peak. At the center of the great hall, upon a white jade platform, Chu Kanglan stood with his hands behind his back. He wore spotless white robes, and faint divine light of law flowed around him, making him seem even more profound and untouchable than before. In front of him, on a table of black ice, lay 2 eggs roughly the size of a palm. The one on the left was covered in dense golden-red, mysterious runes. Those runes crawled slowly across the shell as if alive, releasing dazzling golden light that illuminated the entire hall. From within the glow came faint echoes of dragon roars and phoenix cries. Anyone could tell at a glance that it was no ordinary treasure. The egg on the right looked miserable. It was black from top to bottom, rough like a stubborn stone, found anywhere in the wilderness. It had no shine, no beauty, not even the faintest fluctuation of spiritual power. It lay on the black ice in lifeless silence. If Chu Kanglan had not brought it back personally, no one would have spared it a second glance if they saw it lying by the roadside. Gu Qingyao stood beside Chu Kanglan, her beautiful eyes fixed on the golden egg. Greed and longing nearly overflowed from her gaze. When Chu Kanglan saw Shen Qingyi finally enter, his brow creased slightly, as if dissatisfied with her lateness. But because so many people were present, he did not reprimand her. He only raised a hand, ordering the hall to fall silent. His voice was low and majestic as it echoed through the hall. These two spirit eggs were born when heavenly tribulation lightning struck a vein of 10,000-year divine jade. They were formed by the response of heaven and earth. Today, now that I have successfully emerged from seclusion, I shall bestow them upon my two disciples. Each of you will choose one egg and nurture it with your heart's blood until it hatches. The moment he finished speaking, murmurs rose throughout the hall. All eyes fell upon the two eggs, then shifted between Gu Qingyao and Shen Qingyi. Anyone with eyes could see that the golden egg would surely hatch into a world-shaking divine beast. As for the dark, stone-like egg, most likely it was a stillborn dead thing. Whoever chose it would be destroying their own future. Gu Qingyao hurried forward. She grabbed Chu Kanglan's sleeve with her delicate hand and spoke in a nearly coquettish tone. Master, I was born with a weak constitution, and I cultivate Mount Taihua's pure yang art, which is fierce and blazing. I urgently need an auspicious beast to help balance the fire poison in my body. Master, please grant me that beautiful golden egg. Chu Kanglan looked at her, and the stern coldness on his face softened into a rare, gentle smile. He lifted his hand and patted her lightly on the head. If Qingyao likes it, then take it. This egg filled with 10,000 golden lights does indeed complement the pure yang energy in your body. Gu Qingyao was overjoyed. She quickly took the radiant golden egg into her arms, then turned and cast Shen Qingyi a proud, provocative look. The surrounding disciples immediately showed expressions of understanding. Someone whispered, Shen Qingyi is the eldest senior sister, yet she's always beaten to the good things by junior sister. How useless. Another added, the cultivation world respects strength. Of course, master favors junior sister. She's talented and pleasing. Who can blame him? Shen Qingyi stood in the center of the hall, hearing every word of those small, mocking voices. But there was no anger on her face, no resentment, no unwillingness. She simply looked at Chu Kanglan in silence, waiting for his decision. Chu Kanglan turned toward her. The warmth on his face vanished instantly, replaced by his usual aloof, inhuman coldness. He pointed at the remaining egg on the black ice table. Qingyi, you are the eldest senior sister. You should yield to your junior sister. Take this remaining spirit egg back and nurture it. Cultivators value fate. Perhaps this egg is fated with you. Shen Qingyi sighed inwardly. His words were so grand, so righteous, but in truth he was biased to the bone. He wanted to give Gu Qingyao the best treasure and shove the useless waste onto her. Still, she said nothing. After so many years of cultivation, she had long since seen through this master's cold heart. Shen Qingyi stepped forward silently and lifted the black stone egg with both hands. It was icy to the touch and heavy as iron. The instant her hands touched the shell, something deep within her soul trembled. It was as if an extremely faint yet pure thread of life had pierced through the thick, rough shell and resonated with her heartbeat. Shen Qingyi froze slightly and looked down at the black egg in surprise. But when she carefully tried to sense it again, that strange resonance disappeared without a trace, as though everything just now had been an illusion. Seeing that Shen Qingyi had accepted the black egg obediently and caused no trouble, Chu Kanglan nodded in satisfaction. Then he waved his hand, dismissing the crowd. Gu Qingyao left the hall with the shining golden egg in her arms, surrounded by a crowd of envious, flattering disciples. She was eager to return and begin closed-door nurturing with the finest spiritual medicines and her own heart's blood. Shen Qingyi, by contrast, carried the heavy black egg back to her small bamboo peak alone. Bamboo Peak sat at the very edge of Mount Taihua. The spiritual energy there was thin, and few people ever came. Aside from a swaying grove of green bamboo and 2 or 3 simple bamboo houses, there was nothing else. It was so quiet and cold that it felt almost detached from the world. Shenqi placed the stone egg on a wooden table inside her bamboo house, then sat beside it and studied it quietly. It truly was ugly. Its black surface was uneven and full of impurities. No matter how she looked at it, it resembled a stone picked up from some filthy ditch. She extended a finger and gently stroked the shell, feeling a little helpless. Since she had already accepted it, she would do her best. Taking a deep breath, she bit her middle finger and let 1 drop of pure heart's blood fall onto the top of the black egg. The crimson blood landed on the shell. It did not slide away as normal blood would. Instead, it slowly, bit by bit, sank into the shell and disappeared. As the blood merged with it, the lifeless black egg trembled faintly from within, like an unborn infant kicking once in its mother's womb. This time, Shen Qingyi felt it clearly. It was not an illusion. There was truly a life inside this black egg, and not just any life. It was noble, proud, ancient. It was only injured, or perhaps its vitality had been hidden by some powerful seal, which was why it appeared so dull and dead. A strange tenderness rose in Shen Qingyi's heart. She decided that no matter the cost, she would hatch this little creature. From that day forward, Shen Qingyi began her long life of nurturing the egg. Every morning at sunrise, she carried the black egg to the summit of Bamboo Peak and used the first purple qi of dawn to cleanse its impurities. At night, she held it in her arms and warmed it again and again with the gentlest, purest spiritual energy in her body. More than that, every day she fed it 1 drop of her heart's blood, using her own life force to awaken the soul sleeping deep inside. This method of nurturing consumed her primordial spirit and cultivation severely. After only 3 months, Shen Qingyi's face had grown pale, and her once full spiritual power had already begun to show signs of decline. But she did not give up. She could feel the little creature in her arms growing stronger day by day. Though its appearance remained black and lifeless, its dependence and closeness were clearly transmitted to her through the blood connection between them. While Bamboo Peak remained cold and quiet, Gu Qingyao's Jade Maiden Peak was lively beyond measure. With that golden egg in her arms, Gu Qingyao became the darling of all Mount Taihua. To help her hatch it, Chu Kanglan not only sent priceless spiritual medicines from the sect treasury to Jade Maiden Peak, including 9-leaf purple Ganoderma and heavenly snow lotuses preserved for thousands of years, but he also personally spent 100 years of cultivation to set up a massive spirit-gathering formation beneath the peak. That formation drew in spiritual energy from hundreds of miles around and poured it all into Jade Maiden Peak. Gu Qingyao naturally loved to show off the strange phenomena of her egg. Every few days, brilliant clouds rose above Jade Maiden Peak, and faint shadows of immortal birds danced in the sky. The disciples of Mount Taihua praised her endlessly, calling her a daughter of destiny who would surely raise a divine beast that would shake the entire cultivation world. Gu Qingyao became more arrogant with each passing day. Whenever she saw Shen Qingyi, she would bring a group of followers with her. and looked down at the black egg in Shen Qingyi's arms with open contempt. "Senior sister, you should give up," she said more than once. "What's the use of guarding a broken rock? Even if you drain all your blood into it, a dead egg will always be a dead egg." Shen Qingyi never answered her mockery. She only held her black egg and walked past Gu Qingyao in silence. To her, cultivation was her own path. It had nothing to do with the opinions of others. Time passed like a white horse crossing a crack in the wall. In the blink of an eye, 5 years were gone. During those 5 years, Mount Taihua changed greatly. Because the spirit-gathering formation beneath Jade Maiden Peak had operated beyond its limit for years, the spiritual energy there became so dense it nearly condensed into liquid. But the spiritual energy of the other peaks grew thin as a result. Many elders and disciples were dissatisfied, yet under Chu Kanglan's absolute authority, no one dared to openly complain. Gu Qingyao's cultivation, piled up by endless heavenly treasures, barely reached the golden core realm. But her foundation was unstable, supported almost entirely by the force of medicine. As for the golden spirit egg, it had been nurtured until it was as large as a millstone. The runes on its shell released blinding golden light, covering the entire Jade Maiden Peak in dazzling radiance day and night. Chu Kanglan looked at that egg with pride and satisfaction. He had a feeling that the day it hatched would be the day Mount Taihua's name shook the world. Compared to them, Shen Qingyi seemed pitiful. Over those 5 years, her cultivation had not advanced at all. Instead, because she had used her heart's blood to nurture the black egg day after day, her realm had fallen from the late foundation establishment stage to the early foundation establishment stage. Her face carried a sickly pallor. Her body had grown thinner and thinner. She looked so fragile that a single gust of wind might knock her down, and the black egg in her arms had not grown even a little. Instead, it had shrunk by a circle. It looked rougher than before, even more like an ordinary black stone. The disciples of Mount Taihua laughed at her privately, calling her a fool who had tortured herself into a ghost for the sake of a dead fetus. Chu Kanglan visited Bamboo Peak once. He looked at Shen Qingyi's weak appearance, then at the unmoving black egg, and merely shook his head coldly. "Since you insist on being stubborn, do as you please. Just don't disgrace the name of Mount Taihua's eldest disciple." After saying that, he never again set foot on Bamboo Peak. From then on, he treated Shen Qingyi completely as an abandoned pawn. At last, Mount Taihua welcomed a grand event rarely seen in 100 years. After 5 full years of nurturing, Gu Qingyao's golden egg finally began to release violent fluctuations, signaling that it was about to hatch, to display Mount Taihua's power, and to build Gu Qingyao's reputation. Chu Kanglan sent invitations across the cultivation world. Sect masters and elders from over 100 sects were invited to Mount Taihua to witness the birth of a divine beast. The main square of Mount Taihua was crowded with people. Colorful banners fluttered in the wind. Cultivators from all over gathered together, drinking, talking, and waiting. At the center of the hall, a huge white jade altar had been built. 8 nascent soul elders personally guarded its surroundings, while Chu Kanglan sat on a high platform, unable to hide the pride on his face. Gu Qingyao stood in the center of the altar wearing a gorgeous golden feathered dress. She held the radiant, millstone-sized egg in her arms and enjoyed the awe and envy of everyone present. In a forgotten corner of the altar, Shen Qingyi sat quietly on a wooden chair. She wore a plain white dress washed nearly colorless. Her face was pale, almost transparent, and she still held the black stone egg in her arms. Against the lively, festive atmosphere, she seemed entirely out of place. Many people passing by pointed at her and laughed. Gu Qingyao looked at Shen Qingyi in the corner, and a cruel smile curved her lips. She had deliberately ordered someone to bring Shen Qingyi here today. She wanted the entire world to see that she, Gu Qingyao, was the true favored daughter of heaven, while Shen Qingyi was merely a useless fool guarding a dead egg. Gu Qingyao took a deep breath and began circulating all her spiritual power. She slowly poured the last mouthful of her pure golden core essence into the huge golden egg. As her energy entered it, the golden runes on the shell exploded with dazzling light. The brightness seemed to outshine even the sun, turning the entire sky crimson gold. Faintly, 9 golden dragon shadows rolled through the clouds and roared. The earth shook, auspicious qi surged. It looked as if a peerless god was about to awaken from the egg. The watching cultivators burst into thunderous cheers. Chu Konglan's eyes shone with wild joy. In his mind, he could already see Mount Taihua rising under his leadership, dominating the cultivation world. Gu Qingyao laughed brightly, formed seals with both hands, and cried out, "Divine beast, come into the world!" At that exact moment, a crisp cracking sound came from the top of the golden egg. Crack! The sound was especially clear across the suddenly quiet square. Everyone held their breath and stared wide-eyed at the slowly spreading crack. But what happened next was something no one expected. As the crack widened, what seeped from the shell was not pure sacred light, nor the aura of a divine beast. Instead, thick black mist poured out. The instant the black mist touched the air, it spread rapidly, carrying a foul stench so disgusting it almost became solid. In an instant, it filled the entire square. Some disciples with lower cultivation turned pale on the spot. They retched, stumbled, and several even rolled their eyes and fainted. "What's going on? This smell is wrong!" The square fell into chaos. Cultivators murmured in alarm, faces filled with fear and confusion. Chu Kanglan's smile froze. He suddenly stood and stared at the altar. Gu Qingyao's face turned deathly white. She looked down at the golden egg in her arms in panic. "No," she murmured. "Impossible. This must be the turbid qi released before the divine beast is born. It must be." But reality struck her like a slap. Crack. Crack. Dense cracks covered the shell, and finally the entire golden egg shattered. Fragments of golden shell scattered across the floor. The truth inside was revealed. There was no peerless divine beast. There was only a sticky, foul-smelling pool of black dead blood. In the middle of that blood lay an ugly, shriveled, petrified, malformed fetus. It even had 2 heads. Its dried skin was covered with disgusting tumors. No one could tell what sort of spirit beast it was supposed to be. Clearly, long before Chu Konglan had brought it back, it had already been a dead thing beyond saving. The golden light it released, along with all those strange auspicious phenomena, had only come from a tiny trace of mixed ancient dragon blood in its body. After death, that blood produced a last flicker of spiritual rejection. Then, for 5 years, Gu Qingyao had forcefully poured endless heavenly treasures and tyrannical pure young energy into it. Far from reviving it, she had accelerated the corpse's decay. Now, on this day, it had finally burst open and turned into a pool of rotting blood. The entire square fell into dead silence. Everyone's face carried disbelief, absurdity, and a sense of ridiculous comedy. No one had imagined that the peerless divine beast Mount Taihua had boasted about for 5 years after consuming countless resources was only a moldy, dead fetus. Some rival sect masters, after recovering from shock, could not help letting out low snickers. Those laughs were painfully sharp in the silence. Gu Qingyao stared blankly at the black blood. It was as though her soul had been ripped out of her body. She could not accept it. She had spent 5 years of effort on this egg. She had imagined herself leading a divine beast across the world, becoming admired by all. But now everything had collapsed. She had become the greatest joke in the cultivation world. "No," she whispered, "this isn't real." Then she screamed. Her head snapped up, and her eyes reddened with rage and jealousy. She turned toward Shen Qingyi in the corner and pointed at her. "It was you! Shen Qingyi, it must have been you. You were jealous of me, so you used evil arts to curse my divine beast. That's why it became a dead fetus. You harmed me. I'll kill you." Gu Qingyao had completely lost her mind. With a twisted face, she gathered all her remaining spiritual power and condensed it into a golden flying sword. Carrying fierce killing intent, it shot toward Shen Qingyi. Facing that fatal strike, Shen Qingyi remained seated, calm and motionless. She did not even blink. On the high platform, Chu Konglan's face was so dark it seemed water might drip from it. Today, he had lost all dignity before the entire cultivation world. Seeing Gu Qingyao attack, he did not stop her. On the contrary, a cold glimmer of approval flickered in his eyes. He too needed someone to blame. Someone had to cover up the stupidity of Mount Taihua and of himself. But before Gu Qingyao's flying sword could touch the corner of Shen Qingyi's dress, the situation changed. The black stone egg in Shen Qingyi's arms, silent for 5 years, suddenly trembled violently without warning. A terrifying pressure beyond description erupted from within the egg like a volcano. That pressure was ancient, noble, sacred. It carried an aura that seemed to stand above all heavens and worlds, instantly covering all of Mount Taihua. Under that pressure, Gu Qingyao's golden flying sword shattered 3 feet away from Shen Qingyi, breaking into countless bits of golden light that vanished in the wind. Not only that, all 99 peaks of Mount Taihua began to shake violently. Spiritual energy deep in the earth veins surged wildly, releasing low, thunderous rumbles. The clear sky darkened in an instant. Thick, 9-colored auspicious clouds gathered overhead. Spiritual energy from within 100,000 miles seemed to answer a supreme call, transforming into visible rivers of power that pierced through space and rushed toward the black egg in Shen Qingyi's arms. Auspicious light descended from heaven. Golden lotuses rose from the earth. Lotuses formed from pure spiritual energy bloomed silently in the void, then scattered into golden rain. Countless immortal birds and strange beasts appeared from nowhere, circling above Mount Taihua and crying out with clear, beautiful calls. Their voices were filled with submission and worship. Every cultivator in the square was stunned. They forgot to breathe. They stared at the heavenly phenomena above them in disbelief. This kind of world-celebrating omen, this scene of all beasts worshipping the sovereign, existed only in ancient records. It was said to occur only when a supreme divine being descended into the world. Chu Konglan stood frozen on the high platform, mouth open, body trembling, eyes filled with disbelief. Crack! A sound rang out from the black egg in Shen Qingyi's arms. It was crisp, yet it exploded in every soul like thunder from the 9 heavens. Under countless shocked, frightened, expectant gazes, the impurities on the black shell began to peel away like dust. Beneath them appeared a new shell as flawless and translucent as white jade. There were no complex runes on that shell, only a faint, almost transparent 9-colored stream of light. Then the top of the egg split neatly open. A beam of pure, supreme white divine light shot into the sky, piercing the clouds and tearing a great hole through the 9-colored radiance above. Within that white light, a small creature no bigger than a palm stretched gently, then leapt out of the shell and landed in Shen Qingyi's pale palm. It was an extraordinarily beautiful little beast. Its eyes were red and clear as rubies. Its small ears trembled slightly. Its tiny body was covered in snow-white fur, softer and smoother than the finest silk in the world. Under the sunlight, it glowed with a faint sacred halo, but the most shocking thing was behind it. 9 long, graceful, fluffy tails, as white as snow, unfolded neatly from its back. The 9 tails swayed gently in the air. Each movement caused a tide of spiritual energy to surge. Faintly, above the hall appeared the towering divine shadow of a 9-tailed white fox standing between heaven and earth. A 9-tailed white fox. It's actually a 9-tailed white fox. An old cultivator with broad knowledge cried out in a distorted voice, hoarse from terror and excitement. It was not an ordinary 9-tailed demon fox. It was the ancestor of Qingqiu, a being from ancient myth, the one true 9-tailed divine fox born of heaven and earth, ruler of 10,000 demons, a being before whom gods themselves would step aside. At that moment, Mount Taihua's square erupted completely. Every cultivator, regardless of realm, felt an irresistible pressure rising from deep in their blood. Their knees weakened, and one after another, they knelt to the ground, bowing toward the little 9-tailed white fox in Shen Qingyi's palm. Shen Qingyi lowered her head and looked at the little fox lying in her hand. It gazed back at her with soft, warm eyes full of attachment. It rubbed its fluffy little head against her palm and let out a tiny, tender cry. Shen Qingyi's heart softened completely. 5 years of heart's blood. 5 years of mockery. 5 years of cold eyes and loneliness. In this moment, all of it received the most perfect answer. She reached out with a trembling finger and gently touched the little fox's forehead. The little creature obediently closed its eyes and hugged her finger with both front paws, unwilling to let go. Gu Qingyao, slumped on the ground, looked at this scene as though struck by lightning. She looked at the sacred 9-tailed white fox in Shen Qingyi's palm, then at the reeking pool of dead blood in front of her. Jealousy and despair swallowed her whole. "How could this happen?" she screamed. "Why? Why is her egg a 9-tailed divine fox, while mine is a dead fetus? Why?" A mouthful of blood spurted from her lips. Her golden core, already damaged by the backlash from the shattered flying sword and her overwhelming grief, began to crack. Chu Kanglan stood on the high platform, staring at Shen Qingyi. His expression shifted wildly. Shock, regret, greed, envy, until at last all of it transformed into a nearly feverish smile of flattery. He stepped forward and appeared before Shen Qingyi. "Qingyi, my good disciple," he said with warmth and excitement he had never shown her before. "Master knew you were talented and blessed. I knew you could hatch such a peerless divine beast. Come quickly, let Master take a look at this divine fox. Master will personally build a protective formation for you, so no one can harm it." As he spoke, he impatiently reached out, trying to take the 9-tailed divine fox from her hand. Greed flashed in his eyes. If he could control this fox, or force it to sign a master-servant contract, then he, Chu Kanglan, could become the supreme ruler of the cultivation world. He might even step into true immortality. But before his hands could touch the fox, the little creature's gentle ruby eyes turned cold and majestic. One snow-white tail swept lightly through the air. A vast, unstoppable divine force burst forth like a sea of stars, turning into a white ring of emptiness that slammed into Chu Kanglan's chest. Chu Kanglan, Mount Taihua's strongest cultivator at the peak of the tribulation realm, could not resist at all. Blood sprayed from his mouth. His body flew backward like a cannonball and crashed into a white jade pillar of Lingxiao Hall, shattering the ancient pillar into pieces. He slid to the ground in a miserable heap, face pale, aura instantly weakened. Everyone was horrified. A peak tribulation realm venerable could not withstand a single sweep of this newly born fox's tail. The little fox withdrew its tail and became docile again. It turned its head, yawned tiredly, then shrank into a streak of white light and entered Shen Qingyi's body, settling quietly in her dantian to sleep. It had only just been born. Though its divine might was limitless, it was still young. After using such power once, it needed rest. As the nine-tailed divine fox entered her body, an unimaginable stream of pure innate divine energy flowed back into Shen Qingyi's meridians. Warmth spread through her body. The meridians damaged by years of heart's blood, loss were restored in the blink of an eye, then expanded tenfold. Her cultivation, which had fallen to early foundation establishment, began to surge at a terrifying speed. Middle foundation establishment, late foundation establishment, peak foundation establishment. Then, with a roar inside her body, she crossed the barrier without tribulation. Nascent soul early stage, nascent soul middle stage, nascent soul late stage. In less than 10 breaths, nourished by innate divine energy, Shen Qingyi crossed realms that countless cultivators could not cross in a lifetime. Her cultivation stopped at the peak of late nascent soul, only one step away from soul transformation. Nascent soul pressure surrounded her. Her faded white dress moved without wind. Her pale face became rosy and luminous, and her entire body radiated a sacred, otherworldly nobility. The cultivators in the square were numb with shock. They looked at Shen Qingyi as though looking at a living goddess. Just then, the space above Mount Taihua twisted violently without warning. A massive black spatial rift opened in the sky. From within it came an ancient pressure so boundless and noble that it seemed to swallow heaven and earth. 9 huge, winged unicorn heavenly horses pulled a luxurious carriage made from 10,000-year white jade, glowing softly with divine light. Behind the carriage followed tens of thousands of men and women in matching cyan robes. The weakest among them was at the soul transformation realm. Many were tribulation realm and Mahayana experts. At the front of the group stood 9 old men side by side. They all had silver hair and ancient faces. Their robes were embroidered with lifelike 9-tailed fox totems. Their auras were unfathomable. Each one's arrival caused the laws around Mount Taihua to tremble as if on the verge of collapse. They were peak Mahayana cultivators, half-step true immortals, one step from ascension. The Qingqiu Divine Kingdom. That's the Elder Council of Qingqiu, someone cried out in terror. Qingqiu was a supreme divine kingdom independent of the mortal cultivation world. Its power and foundation were enough to crush the entire mortal realm. Under countless shocked and reverent gazes, a pale, jade-like hand lifted the curtain of the carriage. A man in ice-blue robes stepped out. His face was so handsome it hardly seemed mortal. In his narrow eyes, faint stars seemed to be born and destroyed. He carried no visible spiritual fluctuation, but the moment he appeared, all color in heaven and earth seemed to fade, leaving only him above all things. The Emperor of Qingqiu Ji Linyuan, one of the supreme rulers of the cultivation world, Ji Linyuan stood in the void and swept his indifferent, proud gaze across Mount Taihua's miserable square. At last, his eyes landed on Shen Qingyi, more precisely on the bloodline resonance within her body. For the first time, excitement and reverence appeared on his face. He took the 9 Qingqiu elders and stepped from the void, arriving less than 10 zhang before Shen Qingyi. Then, in front of everyone's horrified eyes, the noble Emperor of Qingqiu and the 9 half-step immortal elders straightened their robes, faced Shen Qingyi, and knelt on both knees in the most solemn gesture of submission. Ji Linyuan of Qingqiu, together with all elders of the Qingqiu Divine Kingdom, welcomes the return of our divine ancestor. We greet the sacred teacher of Qingqiu, Shen Qingyi. Their voices, carrying supreme divine power, spread across the entire mortal cultivation world. Countless sects and countless cultivators felt their souls tremble. They knelt from afar in the direction of Mount Taihua. The square was so silent one could hear a needle drop. The elders and disciples of Mount Taihua felt as if their eyes might fall out. What had they just seen? The Emperor of Qingqiu and 9 elders had knelt to Shen Qingyi, the Mount Taihua disciple they had ignored and mocked for 5 years. And what had they called her? Sacred teacher of Qingqiu. The weight of that title was enough to crush all of Mount Taihua. Shen Qingyi looked calmly at Ji Linyuan and the elders kneeling before her. She knew all this was because of the 9-tailed divine fox sleeping inside her. She had hatched the divine fox. She had nurtured it for 5 years with her heart's blood. Her life aura had been branded into its body, and it depended on her completely. The fox was Qingqiu's ancestor. Naturally, she had become Qingqiu's most honored existence, with a status even above the emperor. Shen Qingyi lifted her hand slightly. "Emperor, elders, please rise." Only then did Ji Linyuan and the elders stand. Their eyes remained filled with worship and gratitude. Ji Linyuan turned toward Chu Kanglan, who had struggled up from the ground with fear and regret on his face, and Gu Qingyao, who sat pale and hollow-eyed in the pool of dead blood. Cold killing intent flashed in his eyes. "Sacred teacher, the people of Mount Taihua were blind. They dared mistreat you and our divine ancestor. Their crime deserves death. With one word from you, I will flatten Mount Taihua and leave no one alive." The moment he said this, the disciples and elders of Mount Taihua were frightened out of their souls. They dropped to their knees, one after another, kowtowing desperately to Shen Qingyi. Their foreheads struck the white jade floor with dull thuds. "Sacred teacher, spare us! Eldest senior sister, spare us! We were deceived by that old fool Chu Kanglan." Begging cries filled the square. Chu Kanglan was trembling all over. He collapsed to his knees again and looked at Shen Qingyi with tears streaming down his face. "Qingyi, it was Master's fault. Master was blind. I could not tell a fisheye from a pearl. Please, for the sake of the years I raised and taught you, spare Mount Taihua this once. I am willing to surrender the position of sect master and make you Mount Taihua's supreme elder. From now on, the entire sect will obey only you." Listening to his desperate flattery, Shen Qingyi felt only emptiness. This man had once stood high above her, controlling everything in her life. But before true power, he was just as lowly and ugly as anyone else. She looked at him quietly. "Immortal Venerable, you overstate things. Shen Qingyi is dull in talent and unworthy of the name Mount Taihua's eldest disciple. As for the grace of your teaching, these 5 years of nurturing the divine fox with 1 drop of heart's blood each day have already repaid all karma between me, Mount Taihua, and you." Her voice was calm. "From this day forward, I, Shen Qingyi, have nothing to do with Mount Taihua." After she finished speaking, she turned to Ji Linyuan. "Emperor, let's go." Ji Linyuan bowed respectfully, as the sacred teacher commands. He then swept a cold glance over Chu Kanglan and Gu Qingyao. Death may be spared, but punishment cannot. Since the sacred teacher is merciful enough to let you live, the karma of insulting her and wasting the divine ancestor must still be settled. He waved his hand. A terrifying spiritual storm swept over Chu Kanglan and Gu Qingyao. Chu Kanglan screamed miserably. His cultivation, gained after finally surviving tribulation, was cut down by more than half in a single strike. He fell straight to the nascent soul realm, with no hope of ascension for the rest of his life. His lifespan also lost hundreds of years, and in an instant he became pale, aged, and withered like a mortal old man near death. Gu Qingyao's end was even worse. Her golden core was already cracked. When the spiritual storm passed through her, it shattered completely. All her meridians broke. She became a cripple, forever unable to cultivate again. After doing this, Ji Linyuan turned back and gestured respectfully for Shen Qingyi to proceed. The 9 winged heavenly horses neighed. Under the reverent gazes of Qingqiu's experts and countless stunned cultivators, Shen Qingyi slowly stepped onto the supreme white jade carriage. As the spatial rift closed, the grand procession of Qingqiu and Shen Qingyi's figure vanished from the sky above Mount Taihua. On the ruined square of the main peak, Chu Kanglan stared at the empty heavens with white hair and trembling hands, his face filled with despair and regret. He knew Mount Taihua was finished. They had lost the only nine-tailed divine fox in the world. They had lost Shen Qingyi, the sacred teacher of Qingqiu. They had offended the Qingqiu divine kingdom. In the years to come, Mount Taihua would sink step by step into decline, regret, and ruin. As for Gu Qingyao, she lay in the stinking black blood, laughing foolishly. She had gone mad. Checkpoint. 3,000 words, 20 min at 150 WPM, the Qingqiu carriage traveled through a radiant void passage, surrounded by streams of divine light as colorful as a shattered galaxy. Shen Qingyi sat on a long white jade couch. The nine-tailed divine fox in her arms seemed to sense that the outside pressure had settled. It moved its ears slightly, then poked its small white head out from her robe. The little creature yawned. Its ruby eyes looked around. When it saw Ji Linyuan and the Qingqiu elders watching it with nervous, worshipful gazes, it shrank back cautiously and buried its face in Shen Qingyi's arms, leaving only a fluffy tail swaying lightly in the air. Seeing the divine ancestor so cold to him, Ji Linyuan was not disappointed at all. Instead, he seemed to feel it was only natural. He bowed slightly and stood to one side, explaining Qingqiu's situation to Shen Qingyi in a soft voice. After the ancient war between gods and demons, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth had declined. Qingqiu had lost the protection of the ancestors' bloodline. Though it still appeared powerful on the surface, its sacred tree had withered, and the seals protecting the divine kingdom were weakening. Sacred teacher, Ji Linyuan said sincerely, our divine ancestor chose to be born in your arms not merely because your blood is pure. It is because you spent 5 years nurturing it with heart's blood without asking for anything in return. You formed the strongest bloodline bond in existence. From today on, all Qingqiu citizens shall regard seeing you as seeing the ancestor. Anyone who disobeys you will be punished by heaven and earth. Shen Qingyi listened quietly, only stroking the little fox's fur and feeling the warmth of the small life depending on her. Once, on Mount Taihua, she had been an abandoned pawn, someone who could be sacrificed at any time, someone used to please her junior sister. In the face of profit, the bond between master and disciple had been thinner than paper. But now, in Qingqiu, she had become the sacred teacher of a vast divine kingdom, and the black egg everyone had despised as a dead fetus was the supreme deity their race had lost for hundreds of thousands of years. The mystery of fate was truly beyond words. The heavenly horses neighed, and the void rift opened once more beneath a clear sky. Shen Qingyi lifted her eyes and saw a boundless paradise spread out before her. The spiritual energy here was so thick it nearly became white mist, flowing among carved pavilions, towers, and bridges. Countless 10,000-year peach blossom divine trees bloomed across the land, their pink petals drifting like snow, carrying a fragrance that refreshed the soul. At the end of the earth stood a white jade divine palace reaching into the clouds like the spine of a god. That was the heart of the Qingqiu divine kingdom, the ancestral temple. The moment the carriage entered Qingqiu, countless Qingqiu beings across mountains and rivers revealed their true forms. Foxes of white, red, silver, and gold prostrated themselves throughout the land, crying out in sacred unison to welcome their ancestors' return and the arrival of their sacred teacher. Ji Linyuan stepped down first and respectfully welcomed Shen Qingyi from the carriage. Holding the nine-tailed divine fox, Shen Qingyi walked step by step up the white jade stairway, leading to the ancestral temple. The instant her foot touched the first step, the Qingqiu divine tree, withered for hundreds of thousands of years, suddenly burst forth with green divine light under the nourishment of the fox's aura. Its massive trunk regained life in an instant. Countless emerald leaves surged out like a tide, forming a green canopy that covered the sky. The laws of Qingqiu stabilized completely. The once damaged National Protection Array returned in the blink of an eye to its peak power from ancient times. Seeing this, countless Qingqiu elders burst into tears. They knelt again, calling out blessings from the divine ancestor and praising the grace of the sacred teacher. Shen Qingyi stood at the top of the white jade stairway, overlooking the vast and beautiful divine kingdom below. The nine-tailed divine fox in her arms seemed affected by the joy of heaven and earth. It stood in her palm, raised its little head, and let out a clear, young cry filled with infinite majesty. From that day on, Shen Qingyi settled in Qingqiu's ancestral temple. There was no false talk of master-disciple righteousness here, no schemes between fellow disciples, no hidden blades beneath smiling faces. There was only endless respect and the finest cultivation resources in the world. Qingqiu's foundation was unimaginably deep. Ancient medicines and immortal pills that no one in the mortal cultivation world had even heard of were sent to Shen Qingyi's temple like common snacks. With those resources, and with the pure divine energy the nine-tailed divine fox fed back to her each day as it cultivated in her arms, Shen Qingyi's cultivation did not waver from her previous damaged foundation. Instead, it became more solid than ever. Only 3 years later, she broke through nascent soul, survived the ninefold Mahayana thunder tribulation, and entered early Mahayana. Such cultivation speed had never been seen in the history of the cultivation world. The nine-tailed divine fox also grew under Shen Qingyi's care and Qingqiu's resources. Its body became more graceful, and with every movement of its 9 tails, it could skillfully control the laws of heaven and earth. Its strength became comparable to a top expert at late Mahayana. Because of the fox, Qingqiu regarded Shen Qingyi as its true guardian deity. Every morning, Qingqiu's elders and rulers of subordinate nations waited respectfully outside the ancestral temple, hoping for Shen Qingyi's summons and listening to her teachings. Her days in Qingqiu were peaceful and fulfilling. But the storms of the mortal world did not stop. 8 years after Shen Qingyi left Mount Taihua, the sect finally reached its end. That day, the sky was dark. Wild wind howled through the broken peaks of Mount Taihua. The once glorious main peak had lost all its former splendor. After losing the fortune of the divine fox, and because most of the sect's spirit veins had been drained to nurture that dead fetus, the spirit-gathering formation beneath Jade Maiden Peak collapsed completely. Spiritual energy across Mount Taihua nearly dried up. Seeing the sect decline day by day, many elders packed up and left or joined other sects. The talented disciples were gone too. Only low-level cultivators with poor aptitude and nowhere else to go remained. Struggling to hold on, Chu Kanglan sat in the main hall on the sect master's golden chair, now mottled and peeling. He looked extremely old. His once black hair had turned dry and white. Deep wrinkles covered his face. His formerly straight back had become hunched. Not a trace remained of the supreme dignity he once possessed as a tribulation realm immortal venerable. To maintain the sect, he had repeatedly burned what little lifespan he had left. A few days earlier, while cultivating, his inner demons attacked, and he coughed blood again. His cultivation fell even further. Now he could barely maintain the peak of golden core. Below the hall came impatient shouting. A man in a fiery red robe stood there. He was an elder of the Blazing Sun sect and had once been among the guests who came to witness Gu Qingyao's divine beast hatching. The Blazing Sun sect had since produced a peerless genius, and its power had risen sharply. Naturally, it set its eyes on Mount Taihua, which had fallen but still had some old foundation left. The Blazing Sun elder pointed at Chu Kanglan arrogantly. "Old Chu, stop pretending. Mount Taihua is nothing but an empty shell now. Today, for the sake of our old connection, the Blazing Sun sect will leave you one path to survival. Hand over the Black Ice Table and the ancestral Taihua Nine Swords scripture. Then we'll take in your remaining disciples. Otherwise, today your lineage ends here." Chu Kanglan looked at this man who once would have trembled before him, but now dared trample on Mount Taihua's dignity, his heart filled with humiliation and sorrow. He remembered 8 years ago. Back then, how glorious was Mount Taihua. Who in the world would have dared act wildly in Lingxiao Hall? Yet he had ruined it all with his bias and stupidity. For the sake of a dead fetus, he had personally driven away the sect's future guardian deity. He had driven away Shen Qingyi, the eldest disciple, who could now kill these pests with one palm. Karma had come. Chu Kanglan slowly closed his eyes. A muddy tear of regret slipped down his face. His voice was hoarse. "If you want the Taihua Nine Sword scripture, step over my corpse." The Blazing Sun elder sneered. "You refuse a toast only to drink punishment. Then I'll grant your wish." But just as he was about to strike, sharp cries rang out from outside Mount Taihua. The few remaining disciples stumbled into the hall in terror. "Disaster! Disaster! The demons! The demons have attacked the mountain!" Chu Kanglan and the Blazing Sun elder were both shocked. They rushed outside and looked up. The thin clouds around Mount Taihua had turned black as ink. Countless demonic cultivators, radiating violent, evil energy, surged toward the main peak like a tide. At their head was a demon general riding a massive bone dragon with wings. He laughed darkly. "I heard Mount Taihua once produced a divine beast. Though it died, the ancient dragon blood within that dead fetus should still exist. Add that to your sect's old foundation, and it will make fine offerings. Today, our Black Heaven demon cult will destroy Mount Taihua and use you as sacrifices for our Lord's divine artifact." The Blazing Sun elder's face changed. He was arrogant, but his sect was far away. He had no intention of dying here. He immediately turned into a beam of light and fled, abandoning Mount Taihua without hesitation. But before he could escape the mountain's range, a giant demonic hand descended from the void. With a slap, the Blazing Sun elder was smashed into a mist of blood before he could even scream. The last disciples of Mount Taihua collapsed in fear and began fleeing toward the back mountain. Chu Kanglan looked at the demonic tide rolling toward him and knew there was no way out. He smiled bitterly. Heaven wants Mount Taihua dead. At that moment, from the ruined Jade Maiden Peak in the back mountain, there came mad, shrill shouting. Gu Qingqiu appeared barefoot among weeds and broken rocks, dressed in a filthy golden robe that had become no more than rags. Her face was covered in dirt. She held a random black, foul-smelling stone in her hands and smiled brilliantly at the grass beside her. "Look, my divine beast has been born. It'll take me to the 9 heavens. It'll help me trample Shen Qingyi beneath my feet. I'm Master's favorite disciple. I'm the true eldest senior sister of Mount Taihua." Suddenly, a demonic cultivator landed beside her. He looked at the insane Gu Qingqiu with disgust. Where did this madwoman come from? Die. With a casual wave of his hand, black demonic fire fell onto Gu Qingqiu. Amid shrill, crazed screams, Gu Qingqiu, the once proud junior sister who had tried so hard to step on Shen Qingyi, was burned to ash in the blink of an eye. Even the black stone in her arms vanished from the world. In front of the main hall, Chu Kanglan was surrounded by several demon generals. He was old, weak, and nearly out of lifespan. In moments, a demonic blade pierced his chest. He coughed blood and collapsed on the steps. The demon general riding the bone dragon looked down at him with disdain. So this is Chu Kanglan, once feared across the cultivation world. How pitiful. Today, I'll send you on your way. The black blade rose high, carrying sharp demonic light, and fell toward Chu Kanglan's neck. Chu Kanglan closed his eyes in despair. He had cultivated for hundreds of years. He had thought he would leave a name in history and reach the highest realm. Instead, he had reached such a miserable end. If only he had not favored Gu Qingyao back then. If only he had given the golden egg to Shen Qingyi, or at least treated her well. If only he had not driven her away. Would the one standing here now to protect Mount Taihua be that nine-tailed divine fox and his eldest disciple? But there was no such thing as if, at the instant the blade was about to sever his neck, the world above Mount Taihua suddenly froze. The howling wind stopped. The raging demonic qi stopped. Everything became like a black and white painting locked in place. The demonic blade hung 1 inch from Chu Kanglan's neck, unable to move even a fraction farther. Then, from the center of the heavy black demon clouds, a blinding beam of white sacred light tore the sky apart. 10,000 rays of auspicious light poured down. Under the terrified gazes of the demonic cultivators, a white jade carriage drawn by 9 winged heavenly horses slowly emerged from a spatial rift. Around the carriage hovered thousands of Qingqiu experts in cyan robes. The aura of each one made the demon generals tremble. The carriage curtain lifted. Shen Qingyi, dressed in plain robes yet noble beyond words, walked out slowly with the grown 9-tailed divine fox in her arms. She looked down at the battlefield with calm autumn water eyes. There was no pity in them and no hatred. The fox nestled in her arms, then swept its ruby gaze coldly over the demonic cultivators below. Only one glance. Bang. The powerful demon general riding the bone dragon shattered into blood mist before he could speak. The bone dragon let out a frightened cry, collapsed into dead bones, and scattered across the ground. Thousands upon thousands of demonic cultivators began disintegrating under that gaze. Their bodies broke inch by inch, turning into black dust that vanished in the wind. The demonic tide that had nearly destroyed Mount Taihua vanished in the blink of an eye under a single glance from the 9-tailed divine fox. The surviving disciples in Chu Kanglan stared in utter disbelief. Chu Kanglan trembled and stared at Shen Qingyi in the sky with eyes almost too dim to see. "Qingyi," he rasped, "my good disciple. You came back to save Master, didn't you? You came back to save Mount Taihua, right? I knew it. I knew you still had Mount Taihua in your heart. You still had me in your heart." His voice was filled with mad joy and hope. He used both hands to support himself, trying to stand and welcome her. But Shen Qingyi did not even lower her eyes to look at him. Her gaze only rested for one brief moment on Mount Taihua's shattered main hall. She had not come today for Mount Taihua. She had not come for Chu Kanglan. The 9-tailed divine fox had suddenly remembered the place where it had been born and wanted to return for a look. Shen Qingyi had brought it here to travel, and while here, she had erased the remaining karma of this place. Her voice was soft, yet it rang clearly through the world. "Immortal Venerable, I told you before, the karma between us is over. Today, the demons have retreated. Whether you live or die from here depends on fate. From this moment on, there is no eldest disciple of Mount Taihua in this world. There is only Shen Qingyi of Qingqiu." After saying this, she turned and walked back into the white jade carriage. Chu Kanglan watched that resolute white figure leave. He watched the carriage slowly enter the spatial rift. His mouth opened, but his throat was filled with blood, and he could not call out. "No, Qingyi, do not abandon me. Do not abandon Mount Taihua." With a desperate, mournful cry, he used the last of his strength to reach forward, trying to grab something. But he caught only a cold autumn wind. With a muffled sound, the golden core inside his body shattered completely under grief and despair. His life force was exhausted. Chu Kanglan's eyes remained wide open, staring emptily at the closing spatial rift. His body slowly fell onto the white jade steps of Mount Taihua, now covered in fallen leaves and dust. A generation's sect master, a once supreme immortal venerable. He died in regret, abandoned by the disciple he had once abandoned, and so Mount Taihua fell. The once glorious immortal sect became history. The remaining disciples scattered. Its halls collapsed. Its spirit veins dried. Weeds grew over the stone paths where countless proud cultivators had once walked. As for Shen Qingyi, she returned to Qingqiu with the 9-tailed divine fox. Years passed. Her cultivation continued to rise. The fox grew larger, more graceful, and more powerful. Its 9 tails could stir the laws of heaven and earth. Its eyes could split the void. Its breath could nourish worlds. After many years, Shen Qingyi and the 9-tailed divine fox reached the peak of the mortal cultivation world. On the day of their ascension, 9 layers of immortal tribulation descended. Thunder filled the heavens, and all of Qingqiu trembled. But the 9-tailed divine fox merely looked up and flicked one tail. The thunder tribulation split apart like torn silk. A golden immortal gate opened above the clouds. Immortal music echoed across all realms. Under the worship of Qingqiu and the reverence of countless mortal cultivators, Shen Qingyi and the 9-tailed divine fox stepped through the immortal gate and ascended in broad daylight. The moment they entered the immortal realm, the entire heavenly domain shook. The 9-tailed divine fox revealed its true form in the sky. Its body stretched across the clouds like a sacred mountain of snow. Its 9 tails, each hundreds of zhang long, unfolded behind it like 9 white galaxies. With every movement, immortal laws sang in harmony. It cried once. That clear cry shook the heavens. Countless immortal lords and ancient beings opened eyes that had been closed for hundreds of thousands of years. The aura of the ancient 9-tailed divine spirit. The ancestor bloodline, lost for several eras, has returned to heaven. One after another, immortal emperors and venerables tore through space and rushed toward the immortal transformation pool where Shen Qingyi had arrived. In moments, dozens of supreme beings appeared in the sky. Ordinarily, they stood high above all, ruling countless immortal domains. But when they saw the 9-tailed divine fox, nuzzling Shen Qingyi affectionately and resting its enormous head obediently against her palm, all their arrogance turned to shock and reverence. No one dared offend her. No one dared question her. From that day forward, Shen Qingyi was invited into the 33 heavens and given a palace beyond the highest immortal domains. The palace was called the Hall of 10,000 Immortals. The 9-tailed divine fox became known as the ancestral divine beast. Worshipped by immortals and gods alike, Shen Qingyi, the woman who had once sat alone on a cold bamboo peak with a black stone egg in her arms, became a sacred existence whom even immortal emperors treated with respect. Checker point, 6,000 words, 40 min at 150 WPM, 100 years after Shen Qingyi and the 9-tailed divine fox ascended, the old site of Mount Taihua in the mortal world had become a barren wilderness. Even low-level beasts rarely lingered there. The once grand mountain gate had collapsed. Half of the stone tablet remained buried in mud. The 2 ancient characters for Taihua were weathered and nearly unreadable. two wandering cultivators passed by one autumn day. One was young. Seeing the ruined mountain, he asked curiously, "Senior, was this place once an immortal sect?" The older wandering cultivator looked at the broken tablet and sighed. More than that, this was once Mount Taihua, one of the strongest sects in the world. At its height, even great sect masters had to bow their heads here. The young cultivator was shocked. Then how did it become like this? The older man gave a cold laugh. Because their sect master was blind. He favored a sweet-tongued junior disciple and neglected his true treasure. Back then, two spirit eggs appeared. One shone with golden light but held a dead fetus. The other looked like a black stone but held the ancient nine-tailed divine fox. Mount Taihua gave the golden dead egg to the favored girl and threw the black egg to the neglected eldest disciple, Shen Qingyi. He pointed toward the sky with reverence in his eyes. Do you know who Shen Qingyi is now? She became the sacred teacher of Qingqiu. Decades ago, she ascended with the nine-tailed divine fox. Even the immortal emperors above must bow to her. If Mount Taihua had not been biased back then, this entire continent might have belonged to them. The young cultivator listened with wide eyes. There was truly such a foolish thing in this world? What happened to that Chu Konglan and the junior sister who stole the egg? What else? The older man said. The junior sister went mad and was burned to ash in a demon disaster. Chu Konglan watched his most neglected disciple ascend with the divine fox while his own cultivation was destroyed. He died vomiting blood in despair. After death, no one even collected his body. Wild beasts ate his bones clean. That was their retribution. Their voices faded into the autumn wind. A yellow leaf spun down and landed on the broken stone tablet, covering the last faint traces of the name Taihua. Far away in Qingqiu, the divine kingdom remained filled with blossoms. Though Shen Qingyi and the nine-tailed divine fox had ascended, their statues stood in the most sacred place of the ancestral temple. The statue of Shen Qingyi was carved from white jade, calm and beautiful. In her arms rested a nine-tailed fox, gentle and noble day and night. Incense burned before them. Countless Qingqiu citizens came to kneel and pray. Some prayed for cultivation. Some prayed for peace. Some only came to thank the sacred teacher who had returned their divine ancestor to them. The story of Shen Qingyi spread across the mortal cultivation world and then into countless lower realms. It became a warning and a legend. Do not judge treasure by its appearance. Do not mistake noise for destiny. Do not abandon sincerity for flattery. Do not think the one who stays silent has nothing, for the one who silently guards a black stone may be guarding the future of heaven and earth. Time continued to flow. For mortals, 100 years was a lifetime. For immortals, it was only a passing cloud. In the 33 heavens, within the hall of 10,000 immortals, Shen Qingyi stood on a stargazing platform overlooking the river of time. Below the platform, countless worlds rose and fell like bubbles in an endless stream. Some worlds blazed with civilization. Some dimmed into ruin. Some were devoured by demons. Some were reborn in light. Behind her, the nine-tailed divine fox had grown into one of the strongest divine beasts in the immortal realm. It lay quietly in the depths of the hall like a snow-white mountain god. Its 9 huge tails hung like clouds, casting soft shadows over the law barriers around the palace. Its power had reached a level where it could interfere with the heavenly laws of lower worlds. The fox opened its enormous ruby eyes and looked at Shen Qingyi's slender figure. It exhaled gently. A stream of white immortal mist transformed into a snow-white cloak and settled precisely and softly over Shen Qingyi's shoulders. Shen Qingyi turned back slightly, looking at the companion who had been with her for more than 1,000 years. Warmth flickered in her eyes. She pointed to a tiny bubble in the river of time below. Little one, look, the laws of that world are collapsing. Its spiritual energy is drying up. If nothing changes, within 100 years it will give birth to countless tragedies like Mount Taihua. The fox followed her gaze. It was indeed a tiny mortal world at the edge of the immortal realm. Gray cracks covered its world barrier, signs of demonic invasion and exhausted earth veins. A hint of disdain flashed in the fox's eyes. For a supreme divine spirit born of heaven and earth, the destruction of such a mortal world was nothing more than part of nature's cycle. It was not worth its attention. Shen Qingyi saw its expression and smiled faintly. You still don't understand human hearts. The lower the world, the more easily greed, bias, and despair grow. But sometimes, in those small places, the most stubborn and pure hearts are also born. The fox lowered its huge head and rubbed gently against her sleeve, as though asking what she wanted to do. Shen Qingyi lifted her hand. A tiny fragment of black shell appeared between her fingers. It was a piece left behind from the shell of the nine-tailed divine fox when it hatched. It looked ordinary, like a dull black stone chip, but within it rested a faint trace of the ancestor's innate bloodline aura. This fragment cannot create another you, Shen Qingyi said softly, but it may give someone a chance. The fox looked at the fragment, then at her. Shen Qingyi sighed. Whether it becomes fortune or waste depends on the heart of the one who receives it. If that person is greedy and foolish like Chu Konglan, then this fragment will remain nothing but a useless black stone. After saying this, she flicked her finger. The black fragment turned into a streak of light and fell from the 33 heavens, passing through layers of immortal clouds, through the laws of countless worlds, and into that tiny mortal realm. It landed silently in a broken mountain valley. Years later, it would be picked up by a woman fleeing for her life. She would keep it as her only relic, believing it to be nothing more than a strange black stone. And one day, because of that choice, another story would begin. The doors of the Hall of 10,000 Immortals slowly closed behind Shen Qingyi, shutting out the starry sky and the noise of the lower world. For many years after that, the hall remained the quietest and holiest place in all realms. Yet the small black fragment that had fallen into the mortal world began stirring waves in that nameless world. 3,000 years passed in the immortal realm. For Shen Qingyi and the nine-tailed divine fox who possessed endless lifespans, those years were no more than a blink. One day, inside the Hall of 10,000 Immortals, a faint ripple of karma appeared in the sky. Shen Qingyi, who had been meditating with closed eyes, slowly opened them. Before her, a water mirror formed on its own. Within the mirror was a dark forest in the mortal world. Rain poured heavily. Mud covered the ground. Broken trees lay everywhere. A young girl of about 16 ran barefoot through the storm, clutching a small black stone fragment to her chest. Her clothes were torn. Blood streamed from wounds across her arms and legs. Behind her, several cultivators chased through the rain with cruel laughter. "Hand over the treasure, little girl!" That stone must be something special if your mother protected it before she died. Give it to us, and we might leave you an intact corpse. The girl stumbled and fell into the mud. She held the black fragment tightly, pressing it against her heart. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were stubborn. "This is my mother's relic. Even if I die, I won't give it to you." The pursuers laughed. "A mortal girl dares speak of death before cultivators? Fine, we'll grant you death." One of them raised his sword. At that moment, in the Hall of 10,000 Immortals, the nine-tailed divine fox opened its eyes. It recognized the aura of its old shell fragment. Shen Qingyi watched the scene quietly. "She's protected it for more than 10 years, she said, even though she never knew what it was. even though it brought her danger. She still refused to abandon it. The fox let out a low sound. Its eyes, once indifferent to the destruction of lower worlds, softened slightly. Shen Qingyi raised her hand and touched the water mirror. Then let her have this chance. In the mortal forest, just as the sword was about to fall, the black fragment in the girl's arm suddenly released a faint aura. It was weak, tiny, almost imperceptible. Yet it was noble beyond words, carrying the bloodline aura of the innate nine-tailed divine fox ancestor. In an instant, the entire black forest froze. The cultivators who had been ready to kill her suddenly felt an indescribable pressure spreading from the fragment in the girl's arms. Their knees buckled, and they collapsed into the wet mud, eyes full of terror and disbelief. What is this? What kind of power is this? The girl froze as well. She could feel the black stone she had protected for over 10 years suddenly come alive in her arms. A clear sound rang deep in her soul. It was the sound of hope. It was the sound of fate turning. In the Hall of 10,000 Immortals, Shen Qingyi slowly withdrew her finger from the water mirror. She looked at the reversed scene and said softly to the silver-haired man beside her, "The karma has fallen. The seed has formed. How far she can go from here will depend on her own fortune." The silver-haired man looked at Shen Qingyi with deep admiration. "Sacred teacher, this act not only saved that girl, it has given hope back to a world on the edge of destruction. Such merit may allow your cultivation to rise another step." Shen Qingyi shook her head lightly and turned toward the endless sea of stars. "Cultivation is only a number to me now. I only hope that in this world, there will be fewer tragedies like the one I once suffered, and more living beings who can still hold on to their true hearts in the darkness." Her voice was very soft, yet it carried a supreme vow of the great Tao, echoing throughout the Hall of 10,000 Immortals for a long time. The years continued to flow. In the divine palace beyond the 33 heavens, Shen Qingyi and the nine-tailed divine fox still watched over the boundless worlds in silence. And the legend of the biased master, the stolen spirit egg, and the birth of the nine-tailed white fox did not fade with time. Instead, it became an eternal beacon across countless worlds. The mortal realm changed, the immortal realm changed, but the purest, most resilient heart in the world, and the divine fox that guarded all things, endured through the endless river of time, forever worshipped by the three realms, offering protection across all ages.